Good evening. This is Subhash Gatade, welcoming you all to the 30th lecture in the Democracy Dialogue series. Uh, our guest this evening is Professor Sucheta Mahajan, an eminent historian, and she was formerly at Center for Historical Studies, JNU, and she was also the chairperson of the Archives of History there. We feel really honored and we're thankful to her that she accepted our invite to deliver this lecture. Professor Sucheta Mahajan has been a visiting professor and fellow at various international and national institutes. She was a member of the prestigious international research project such as Spectris, associated with Global Heritage Institute. She has authored and edited many books on India's independence, partition, challenge of communalism, and composite culture also. Here is a list of few of her books. Independence and Partition, The Erosion of Colonial Power in India, India's Struggle for Independence, 1988, which was she co-authored with Professor Bipin Chandra, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, and Professor Mridula Mukherjee. RSS, School Text and the Murder of Mahatma Gandhi, the Hindu Communal Project. Education and Social Change, MVF and Child Labor. Professor Sucheta Mahajan is presently working on a book on Gandhi's last years. This evening, she will be talking about secularism in a religious mode, Gandhi's practice during partition. Friends, please join me in welcoming Professor Sucheta Mahajan. Please.
Okay. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you so much, the conveners of Democracy Dialogues, Subhash ji and Ravi ji, for inviting me to speak in this very prestigious and very politically and intellectually important series. I have titled the talk today, Secularism in a Religious Mode, ? Gandhi's practice during partition. Some of the words may seem a little unusual in the way they are being used here. Normally, religion and secularism are seen in contradistinction to each other. Very rarely do we talk about practice when we talk about Gandhi. We normally don't use that word very much. We talk about Gandhi's ideas, Gandhi's thoughts. But there are reasons why, as I said, I'm using all these words which are not normally used in this talk, and it will be very clear why I'm doing this. Now, if we look at the juncture of independence and partition, if we flash back those many years, Gandhi was searching for sources of tolerance to fight communalism, which was totally rampant, and to prevent partition. Satyagraha, ahimsa, or passive resistance, as others called it, and civil disobedience had forced the imperial regime to consider and plan for and declare their exit from the country. But this was Gandhiji's lament. Ahimsa, he said, does not seem to work in the field of what he called Hindu-Muslim relations. Texts like Hind Swaraj, which today also Gandhian scholars refer to as the quintessential Gandhian text, they did not provide any answers. So Gandhi set out on what he saw, and he described himself as the most difficult mission in his life: to restore communal harmony. And specifically, this mission was a very long visit and stay in Noakhali in East Bengal in the end of 1946. Gandhi, I do want to remind you here, friends, always emphasized one aspect of his life. He said, "My life is my message." We normally see this word bandied about just as a truism, but for Gandhi, this was very serious. What he says is, what he made clear was, he said, don't go by what I say, but by what I'm doing. And it is this life, as he said, which was his message, which he played out in public, so much so that even the most private self of his was out there in the public for all to minutely inspect and deride and dismiss and worse. So, this is the walk with Gandhi in Noakhali that I intend to take you along with me this evening. But before we move to that distant corner of the subcontinent, let me ask a question, which is where the general theme of the talk comes up. That is, how does Gandhi work through what one can call an intersection of faith, dharma, if you like, religious practice, politics, and a secular being? Now, I want to make it very clear that this talk, I chose this topic and gave up what I was earlier going to talk about on Hindutva at the time of partition, which I would, if I'm invited, be very happy to take that up another time. Because of Rajiv Bhargav's talk uh, in the last session of Democracy Dialogues, where he spoke about secularism and religion. And it took me back many years to 1994, when Partha Chatterjee, Rajiv Bhargav, Akil Bilgrami, and many others had written on this theme of secularism and tolerance and religion in the EPW, and then it was followed up by a book which Rajiv edited. And where it intersected with my life at that time was that I had just undertaken to write up on Gandhi's last years at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies in Shimla, and Rajiv and a whole lot of other people that I've just mentioned and others came up um, to Shimla to the institute, and there was a seminar on theorizing secularism and versus secular praxis. So many of my ideas about Gandhi, secularism, religion got framed in the context of that, the debate at that time, that is the mid 90s, and specifically this thing. So I thought that it would be very good to take it up today so that, in a sense, there is a continuity in our series with that of the Rajiv Bhargav, the earlier speaker. Now, the word Gandhi did not work with the word secular in the very French notion, what they call laïcité, that is, the state is completely non confessional, but in what very often is called the Indian national movement sense of secularism, which is equivalent to anti communalism on one side. And on the other side, it would be described best as the significance of tolerance as a civilizational value, acceptance of religious difference, the urge to find common ground across the religious spectrum by drawing upon key practices from different religions. Indeed, in Gandhi's understanding, the secular is premised upon not a separation from faith, but upon owning up proudly, if you like, to one's spiritual identity, as much as accepting the spiritual or religious identity of a person from a different faith. Now, for Gandhi, this was not a contradiction. And hence, what one can call, in his case, what he was doing was creatively interpreting religion, faith, dharma, if you like, the word he used. He drew inspiration from a civilizational ethos of mutual respect and tolerance for other faiths. And in his person and in his practice, hence, Gandhi became, I would assert, a far more significant challenge to communalists of all hues, but primarily Hindu and Muslim, than a person who would have embodied a sharp separation of religion from the political sphere. That is, it is precisely his secularism being rooted, in a sense, in his faith, in his dharma, that poses a greater challenge to communalism than if he had been sharply secular in what I'm calling the capital S sense of secularism. Now, there are a few cobwebs we find around Gandhi's perspective on religion and the public sphere, and one can also call it a web. Um, One is the one which is spun by scholars like Ashish Nandi and T.N. Madan, who are, known as the anti-secularists. And they pick up one statement of Gandhi primarily, which is, I approach politics, Gandhiji said, as everything else, in a religious spirit. And Madan and Nandi in particular, and following them, some others, pick this up and also pick up his statement where he says that truth is my religion and ahimsa is the only way of its realization, and end up arguing that Gandhi was an anti secularist, one who talked about the village and um, tolerance from an indigenous tradition and not secular. Now, this is something which it's very important to very quickly just put this aside by pointing out that it is a very clear, distorted interpretation of Gandhi's perspective on religion and secularism. For one, Gandhi, when he talked about religion, for him it meant dharma. It was not organized religion, which he was very critical of. And secondly, and I think very importantly, particularly very close to independence, and when he's talking about the secular state, on education under a secular state, on the army, for example, various aspects that he's questioned about. He's very clearly says, I'm just quoting very quickly one sentence he said, when he was asked, what is your view on the state? Should it be secular? And he says, um, in the India for whose fashioning I have worked all my life, every man enjoys equality of status, whatever his religion is. And the important sentences, he says, the state is bound to be wholly secular. And he goes on to say, I go so far as to say that no denominational educational institution in it should enjoy state patronage. And there were many statements of this kind indicating that there was not that much difference between Jawaharlal Nehru and Gandhi, as it is often made out to be in a certain type of writing on secularism. Now, more generally, Gandhi speaking on religion, on communities and nations, I'm going to talk primarily about 1947 today, but just wanted to point out a couple of things before I get to Noakhali. And one was that um, from very early on, from the 20s, for example, when I was, looking at what Gandhi had to say about history writing and the colonial position and how close it was to the communal position. It's fascinating how clear he was on that. He's questioning that very clearly. He would be somebody who would have um, spoken out today when about what is happening about textbooks and history writing. And he pointed out, in fact, I'm just quoting a sentence from 1925, where he said that this whole colonial interpretation of history is wrong, it's distorted, it's portraying the past as ridden with Hindu Muslim conflict. And he goes on to say, I quote a sentence, he says, the two races, by that he means Hindus and Muslims, lived at peace among themselves during the Muslim rule. Now, you and I may have a quarrel with him about the use of the term Muslim rule, but we let that go, or even the word races. The point is that he's not accepting a communal interpretation of Indian history. Equally important, when he coming to 1940, when Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the Muslim League headed by him makes the demand for a separate homeland for the Muslims on the basis of the two nation theory, Gandhi, in contrast to Jinnah, Jinnah Sahab had said that Islam and Hinduism are different and distinct social orders. Social orders. Please note the word. And Jinnah Sahab had said Hindus and Muslims can never evolve a common nationality. And they are two different civilizations. And Gandhi very clearly countered this and said, no, Muslims are mostly converts from Hinduism or are descendants of converts. And went on to explain how they converts do not cease to belong to their own groups, to their own regions, where they come from, merely because of a change of faith. And I'm sure what's coming to your mind, those of you who are hearing me right now, must be what I'm thinking of, that this is something which we probably need to send to our Prime Minister, who just a few days ago said that the minorities, the Muslims in particular, were outsiders. He had used a very unfortunate term also for that. So Gandhi was very clear on this. And those who speak in the name of Gandhi, as sometimes the present regime does, it's very important that we hold a mirror up to them and show them repeatedly that they cannot claim to be legatees of the Mahatma in any which way. They are, it's what he says is completely different from their politics and their view of India and our civilization. Coming up, moving to the religious context of Gandhi's political practice, before I move to his struggle against communalism in Noakhali, there are just a couple of things that I wanted to draw your attention to. Now, one is fasting. Now, you've all heard about and know about Gandhi using fasting or employing fasting as a weapon in his political armory, and that he used it extremely effectively against political opponents. Now, most of the writing on this, there is not much, but those scholars, the Gandhian scholars who write on this, from Bhikhu Parekh to others, explain this fasting, Gandhi's taking up fasting, to his being inspired by his mother's practice of fasting, which is coming from the Vaishnav Jain tradition. And that how during the 4 months during monsoon, the 4 holy months known in India as the Chaturmas, um, this is what inspired him. Now, if we look at the 1940s, Gandhi is talking about fasting and what inspires him. And you will be very, very interested to know that it is not the Vaishnav Jain tradition at all by that time. It is completely couched in Christian terminology. When he goes on a 21-day fast unto death in February 1943 from jail, frail old man, Kasturba, he's just lost Mahadev Desai, his secretary, and almost like a son. Kasturba is ailing. He is being docketed as a admirer of the Japanese, dubbed a fascist by the government. And in this very, situation of being totally cornered, he goes on this fast. And how does he refer to fasting when he explains it? He calls it crucifixion of the flesh. Crucifixion of the flesh. Pyarelal, his secretary, describes it as that Gandhi in this period was, his way was the way of the cross. At another point in the same period, Gandhi says, fasting cannot be undertaken mechanically. One such act of perfect sacrifice would suffice for the whole world. And whose example does he take? He says, such is held to be the example of Jesus. And he goes on to say, a completely innocent man offered himself as a sacrifice for the good of others, including his enemies, and became the world's ransom. It was a perfect act. It is finished, Gandhi said, were the last words of Jesus. Now, a few years later, in September 1947, independence and partition have happened, and Gandhiji is not in Delhi celebrating, but he's in Calcutta and he's fasting, he's mourning. He is requested to by local leaders to stay on there. In fact, after 15th August 1947, to quell the riots which have broken out. And there, how does Gandhi explain it? He said, God has at least given me to work and die for communal peace. I fast for the restoration of communal harmony. This is how he explained his acceptance to the people who had come to beg him to stay on, not go to Punjab, but to stay on and help Calcutta settle down. All of you have heard of Gandhiji's last fast, the very famous last fast of from the 13th to the 18th of January 1948. Just a few days, couple of weeks before he was so brutally assassinated. And when he's explaining this fast, it's a written message that he gives to the prayer meeting. What does he write? He says, I embarked on the fast in the name of truth, whose familiar name is God. Now, why would Gandhi refer to the Christian example of Jesus's crucifixion and not to Jain monks who fasted to death, or broader Hindu beliefs that saw fasting as one of the ways to the realization of the self? The latter were rooted in the individual's evolution. It was part of a personal journey. Whereas the sacrifice of Christ, as Gandhi saw it, carried within it the redemption of the world, or at least the promise of the redemption of the world. For Gandhi, too, fasting was a form of penance for wrongs which had been committed. So when Gandhi went on fast, it was not for personal evolution, but it was for a moral transformation in society. He was looking for a change of heart among those who had been intolerant, among those who had been guilty of violence or worse. And as because he saw the imperfect practice of ahimsa, he saw the fault in himself for what was wrong in society. The connection he made between the personal and the public selves, in his practice of ahimsa, and the impact of that on the political and moral terrain of public life. Now, this is located within the Christian tradition that he so evocatively highlights. Now, if there was one place which preoccupied Gandhi in the last year of his life, it was Noakhali, situated, as we know, in the south of the vast delta crisscrossed by the Ganga and the Brahmaputra before they pour out into the sea. In 1946, that is before partition, it was very remote. It was in the furthest division of Chittagong in Bengal and very difficult to access, especially after the rains. Now, here there had been widespread riots in the month of October, following upon the Calcutta killings in August 1946. And the target of the anger of the majority Muslim peasantry in this region had been the Hindu merchants and landlords. Hindu merchants, landlords who were not more than 20%, Muslim peasantry almost 80%, and the form that it took starting from the time of the famine and the impact of the famine and the World War, it took the form of an economic boycott of Hindus, of the Hindu landlords, and it escalated once there was the Calcutta killings and, you know, the whole country was going to move in a very dramatic way towards civil war. Noakhali became an area which saw, I would say, I called it riots, but it was almost a state of terror. State of terror or a reign of terror in the sense that um, the just to give you one or two figures very quickly, even 13 days after the riots had started, the statesman reported that there was still looting, killing, arson was continuing in four thanas in Noakhali, where the population was 90,000, and in 70 villages in what was called Tipara district, where the Hindu population was 40,000, and these villages continued to be besieged by mobs of Muslims and particularly Muslim communal groups. The role of a peer turned politician, earlier he had been an MLA also, Ghulam Hussain Sarwar, had given a call for jihad on 29 September. But even as I said, 2 weeks after that, it was still, situation was very bad. Now, just as Bardoli, many of you will recall Bardoli, I hope, was a site for Prayog. You remember Gandhi used the word Prayog even in his autobiography. That is, it was a laboratory where Gandhi fashioned civil disobedience. Noakhali was for Gandhi a karm bhumi for the working, where he was going to see that ahimsa, which he had used so effectively, he felt, where it came to the anti imperialist struggle, so much so that the British were being forced to leave India, how to now make it work in the field of communal, to bring about communal harmony, how to get it to work for Hindu Muslim relations. And interestingly, along with the word karma bhumi, the word that he adds on is the word tirth pilgrimage. I'm not at every point going to say that, please note, this is, the religious iconography of it, but, it is very clear from the terms he's using, karma bhumi, tirth yatra, where how his secular and political practice is being nourished by his dharma. Now, in an ideal world, friends, I would have liked to, and I tried many a time, to walk down the paths that Gandhi had traversed in Noakhali in that winter of 1946-47. And there are a few pictures that we have, which I will request Jatin, if he could show the slides from 2 to 7. at this point. These are pictures from the newspapers at that time. Gandhi's visit to Noakhali. Just go a bit slower. This is his reaching. Yeah, this one. I just wanted you to note one very interesting thing: how it's the spinning wheel in the Congress flag, not yet the Ashok Chakra. So this is the Congress flag pre-independence. Gandhiji, and he Chicago radio, and he always had the group. They would accompany him, and he would be able to reach out with the microphone. Whatever we might say about his being a very traditional person, he was very interested in technology and in using technology to reach out to as many people as he could. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the crowds that you can see when he's reached the station at Chowmuhani, and he's addressing the crowds. He's there on the right under the umbrella, and you can see the police presence, etc. Next slide. This is a very interesting photograph. Please note that it's the inspector of police, one gentleman who, in fact, became Gandhiji's admirer, Irishman by the name of McInerney, who has written some memoirs about Gandhiji, which I found in the British Library in London. He's the one who's holding the umbrella aloft for him. We're talking about something else right now, but these are very interesting things to note as far as the relationships went, how the whole the war of hegemony which was won against the British. It's very fascinating. And of course, the rest is Gandhi's and entourage and the local people. Just see how the tall grasses of Noakhali and a very, very difficult area. Next slide. This is at a prayer meeting. Please go on. These are the typical huts in this region. This one is a special hut which was made for Gandhiji, which he ordered to be disbanded. That's why I included it here, because he said, I will not stay in such a proper hut. I will stay in a hut in a Muslim, with a Muslim family, and I will sleep on the floor. So they had to disband it later on, but this was the style of the huts there. Next slide. This is the map. You can see very clearly the one below, in particular, the dark arrows. That was the main area of the Padyatra, and the smaller ones with the arrows are where when he settled for 40 days in Sri Rampur. Then he used to go every day to a new village, but come back. But then he decided to go on a Padyatra. So the darker one is the Padyatra, where at night he would just stay on at one place. Now, this map is from the Gandhi ashram in Noakhali. I took a picture of it from there, though it is available elsewhere. Please go next slide. Now, we'll stop here with the slides. I'll ask you to show this in the next when I ask you again. Okay, thank you. One second. Yeah. Now, as it happened, I could only make a visit in 2019, and that too just for a few days, 4 or 5 days. Now, can you just show us these slides, please, Jatin? It will be 8, 9, 10, 11. Is this Can we see it on the, yeah?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, fine. So so these are 4 or 5 slides. These are photographs I took in 2019, just to give you a sense of what Noakhali is like now, and not very different. The green landscape, the small lanes. So we can you just run through them, Jatin? 8, 9, 10, 11. Now this is a small little shop. You can see me sitting there. And this is a very interesting, you can see even now you have these kind of dilapidated huts from that time. Okay, fine. This is Abul Kalam. I will just come to him, to him in a minute. He was the first person whom I had met. Now, our first visit was to Sri Rampur, where Gandhi had settled down in virtual isolation for 43 days. He likened his action to that of a wise gardener who tries to raise one seedling properly instead of broadcasting seeds in the wind. Having nurtured one plant, he said, he could multiply the process everywhere. What was he doing in Noakhali? He was putting up with as much inconvenience to himself as possible, hoping that by his own suffering, putting his body to suffering, he would be able to gain entry into the hearts of the Muslims of the region. So, what was this inconvenience? He sent away all his associates, except one interpreter and one typist, and denied himself any comfort, help, any association, slept in a hut whose walls were charred. Jatin, can you just show that again? That last slide, which shows the burnt hut? Before this? Yeah. So you can see here this charred hut. Okay. Now, he handled his correspondence himself, had to do his own massage, bath, meals, etc. Now, the first person we met in Sri Rampur, the place where Gandhi stayed for 40 odd days, was Abul Kalam. Can you show? Yeah, this gentleman. 85 years old, bare chested, wearing a blue check lungi. Kalam immediately recalled the daily prayer meetings at which hymns from different religions were sung. And he recited to us Raghupati Raghav Rajaram, Patit Pavan Sitaram. And this was known as the Ram Dhun at that time, translated as Lord Ram, descendant of Raghu, uplifter of the fallen, also known as an invocation to Ram. So it's very interesting that this Ram Dhun, which Abul Kalam, 85-year-old man, remembers after so many years, along with Ram Nam, that is simply recitation of the name of Ram, was offered by Gandhi to the Hindus of the area, the victims, to overcome their fear of their Muslim neighbors. Now, what Gandhiji felt was that, and he was expressing this in his writings, in his speeches, that we were able to overcome our fear of the British. Now the challenge is, how do we overcome one community's fear of the other? In this rampant communal riots and almost civil war, which was spreading all over the country from August 1946 onwards. When Gandhi reached Noakhali, I'll just quote one or two sentences here very, very, very quickly. Uh, he saw the Hindu women in particular looking what he called benumbed by fear. To quote him, he said, the faces of the victims were pinched and pale, and there was a scared, haunted animal look in their eyes. Pyarelal goes on to talk about how Hindus had left their villages, and those who had stayed on had paid the price of conversion, forced marriages, forsaking of their cultural identity, and most terrifying of all, silence. Pyarelal described Gandhi's visit to a deserted house where many people had been killed. And in his description, he writes about how the exercise books of a young boy who had been killed in that house were still thrown open. And he goes on to say, those that were not killed or did not run away were said to have been converted, including a deaf mute who, by piteous signs, showed the tuft of hair in a piece of cloth which had been removed from his head and to which he still clung. And Pyarelal's comment on this is that the gestures of this dumb boy were more expressive of the pain of conversion and the assault on the identity of the people, of the local Hindus, more than any figures possibly could be, the numbers. Uh, Pyarelal writes about a visit to another village where he says Gandhiji stopped dead and stood in reverential silence for a few minutes as he came upon broken images lying scattered on the footpaths and among the ruins of the temple. Can we just take the next 3 slides? Jatin, yeah. Now these are, you can see, he's coming down from a temple, and there are all, people from his entourage and others who are there. And next slide, it's a broken temple. This is again a dilapidated temple that we had found, and a Hindu family whom we met took us there. It's now a cement godown, but right on the top, on the on the masthead, as it were, the figures of the figures of the gods were still inscribed. Uh, 16, yeah, this is the same abandoned cement house, depot for cement and hardware, etc., which was earlier a temple. Now, it was the cry of, I'm using again Gandhi's words, Gandhi had called it the cry of outraged womanhood that had called him to Noakhali when he was asked, why are you leaving Delhi where everything is happening and going? And he said, it is the cry of outraged womanhood which is calling me there. I have to go. Now, slide 17, you cannot make out from here, and it's just as well, because this is a figure of, there is a woman, you cannot even make out that it is a woman. She's so much bent, right? She's so completely bent. She's at the feet of Gandhi and the people with him. And she has come to the prayer meeting of Gandhi with a bone from her murdered husband's body. And she was then persuaded by the people there to, keep it away and consoled and etc. So all I'm trying to indicate is that the situation was a very raw situation into which he came. It was not what our present day political leaders or even our political activists who go, either from helicopter or even when they go by road, when they go to scenes of communal conflict, very often there's a certain amount of distance and, the whole thing has been sanitized before the person is exposed to that. So you can think of Gandhi at this age, just a year before he was murdered, in this situation. Now, what was Gandhi's, apart from sympathy, what was Gandhi's way, or what was Gandhi's strategy? What did he say to the local people there? How did he build communal harmony? To the Hindu women, he said, you have to overcome your fear. You have to go back to your houses. You have to get on with the business of living. And when they said, what if we are confronted again? What if something again? And he said, I am there. I will first give my life. I will see to it that nothing happens to you. So it was and his associates would be sent out to the villages to do that. Another very important message that he had to this whole question of the assault on religious freedom, or what we might even call the communal situation, was Gandhi stood up for the right of every community, every individual to practice one's religion, including adherence to visible symbols of faith. Why am I pointing this out? Because this is very unusual. At least in my own, I have not come across this kind of way, this kind of reaction, and this kind of a path being forged in a communal scenario where a person goes much more beyond sensitivity to religious identity. Normally, we try to blur differences. We try to have this bye-bye type of stuff. But his was no. The Hindu woman, she has the right to practice her religion. So, what does he say to them? He said, go back to performing arti, go back to the uludhvani. Uludhvani was the sound of welcome and festivity, many of you may be familiar with. He said, you must wear your sindhur, you must wear your shankha bangles. Now, the impact of this was such that within a few weeks, when Gandhi was going from village to village, he found that in one of the villages, Dasgaria, I don't have a picture of that, he was greeted by a large number of women who came forward singing the Ramdhun. And so his associates were working on this. Bibi Amtu Salam, Muslim lady you may have heard of from Punjab and later Delhi. There's Pyare Lal. There were so many other people who had gone along with him. And so these fear-stricken residents of these villages got the strength to practice their faith. Slowly, temple bells were heard, and the sounds of what is known as Kirtan or Harisan Kirtan in this part of Bengal began to be heard. Now, very, very quickly, coming to Gandhi's practice of brahmacharya, because this practice of brahmacharya and the link with ahimsa that Gandhi makes, it's very important to be aware of this, because, particularly because, friends, I find that it continues to invite comment, consternation, criticism, and condemnation even today. There are books which are published by, the yellow press about his quote unquote sleeping with his nieces, giving so-called prurient details. And I would say that Gandhi's brahmacharya, if you look at social media, that it can compete, or it does compete in a kind of voyeuristic sensationalism with that other non-event of this period, the alleged romance of Edwina and Jawaharlal. But that's another matter. The point I'm making here is that the choicest of hate speech is directed at Gandhi in social media on this question, and which is why I'm just very quickly flagging this before moving on to the lessons we can get from Gandhi's life in Noakhali for today. I see brahmacharya as, like fasting, as a creative reinterpretation of a traditional religious practice to orient it for a social purpose or to a political end. Now, Gandhi, if you recall, I had said earlier, was convinced that the path to true ahimsa was through Noakhali, right? That's why he came there, to remove the imperfections in his practice. And Gandhiji had said, if Noakhali is lost, India is lost. And I have come here to demonstrate the efficacy of ahimsa. So that is how he saw what he did. There is a microcosm in which he operates, and that microcosm then can impact on the macrocosm. So then comes to Gandhi the idea, again, do note the religious iconography or imagery of a yagya. He uses the word yagya, we can call it a sacrifice. It's not merely an experiment, friends, it's not a prayog. It's a yagya in which he said, I am going to toss my weary body. And when he sends away his associates um, and settles down on his own in Sri Rampur for 40 odd days, the question that he's sitting up through the night and penning his thoughts, rather dictating them to N.K. Bose, he says, do I represent this ahimsa in my person? If I do, then deceit and hatred that poison the atmosphere should dissolve. The point I'm making, friends, is that this was a period of very serious personal introspection on his part. And his choice of the solitude in Sri Rampur in Noakhali was precisely for this reason, that giving himself the opportunity or time, breaking away from everything to figure out what has gone wrong in his practice of ahimsa, because he was convinced that if his practice of ahimsa became perfect, it would first bring about communal harmony in Noakhali, and from there it would bring about communal harmony in the whole country, and that would lay the foundations for a campaign or a struggle, whatever you want to call it, to prevent partition. I'm not quoting a lot here, though it's very tempting because, you know, he is the best. I mean, he's Gandhi, you know, explains himself better than anybody can. And just one or two sentences that he says. He says, was it the weapon of the weak, as my critics said, that is ahimsa? Or was it truly the weapon of the strong? And then he explains, he says, I know that ahimsa is a perfect instrument. If it did not answer in my hands, the imperfection is in me. My technique was at fault. Hence, I have come here trying to make the discovery. I must therefore, please note the words, drown myself in darkness till I see light. God only knows when it will come. So, pondering on what he saw as the failure of his ahimsa, he links with this the what he sees as the further imperfection in his brahmacharya practice. Now we know that Gandhi had practiced brahmacharya since a very long time, and I'm not going into that at all. But at this point, in order to test his practice, to see if there were any vestiges of sexual desire left in him, and hence those could be linked with the what is happening in society, he decides to share his bed with his grandniece Manu after getting her consent. What I find very important about this episode is that this episode, too, a very, very difficult one to explain to people, Gandhi did not hesitate. That is, this was something which was lived out. This part of his life also was lived out in full public gaze. Contrary to many of his associates who did not oppose Gandhi, but said, given the delicacy of the subject, we urge you to refrain from making it public. This is all the people from the ashrams, from Kaka Kalelkar to Vinoba Bhave and many others. Gandhi did not take this advice. He went a step further. He wrote about this in detail in his newspaper, the Harijan. And he started to speak about it in the prayer meetings in the evenings. And in this context, when this is something which, you know, his associates all over the country. Many of them don't like and start writing to him. Some of them leave the Harijan, some of them leave the ashram also for a while. What does he say to them? And this is very important in the context of our overall topic of our talk today, that is secular practice and dharma. Professor Irfan Habib, some of you may recall, had written a pamphlet, an article on Gandhi as a Hindu social reformer, and how he was opposed so vehemently by the conservative sections on issues of untouchability, etc., because he challenged them. He challenged them because of this aspect of his. And here Gandhi said this. He said, I'm quickly quoting a sentence. He said, a reformer cannot afford to wait till others are converted. He must take the lead and venture forth alone, even in the teeth of universal opposition. I want to test, enlarge, and revise the current definition of brahmacharya. So it is a big thing that he was doing, by which you swear in light of my observation, study, and experience. Interestingly, his brahmacharya did not necessitate segregation of the sexes or abjuring the company of women, as was the case, as you know, with many traditional practitioners of this practice. So there was more to it than merely a practice, a quasi-religious practice. Gandhi was not merely testing his practice, he was trying to deploy the ultimate power of ahimsa, non-violence, to confront the communal violence and to see then how could ahimsa then be spread to others. Moving from here to the Padyatra and the prayer meetings that were the staple of Gandhi's stay in Noakhali. I had shown you the map of his Padyatra and the village to village visits. We had, on my trip in 2019, we visited Masimpur, and he would, can we have slide 18? Is
It's
that
already?
No, I know it's already been shown. Can you show it again? Is the number showing there? No, not this. No? No, it's okay then. Let it be. Which is 18? Or maybe, if you download it, then the numbers will come.
I have downloaded it, but it's not showing on our screen because it's full screen. Let me see.
Okay, doesn't matter. It's fine. It's just, we can just take it off, huh? It doesn't matter anymore. So the Padyatra, as I said, sleeping in a new village every night in the house, preferably of a poor Muslim. And one thing I did just before I move on, did want to say here is that he did face hostility from Muslims. And what was his reaction to that? There was an instance where Pyarelal writes, doors were shut in his face. Another thing, he went into a person's house, the person shut the door on him and spat on him. When Gandhi was walking in the Padyatra, he stopped wearing his sandals and went barefoot. The reaction of some of the youths connected with the Muslim League and others was to throw briars, kata on the paths and to soil the paths with excreta and glass. But it was for him a challenge. He said, okay, it helps me to understand how angry people are. And all the time that he was moving in this area, the Muslim League chief minister in Suravardi, the Muslim League volunteers in that area were constantly telling him, why don't you go to Bihar Muslims have been attacked over there, and you have to show your secularism. If you're truly secular, you must go there. And I must say, um, he just stood his ground and said that I will go there when my inner voice tells me. I'm not going to go because someone else asked me to go. The next point that I wish to flag is about, which I'm just calling, how to, the challenge before Gandhiji was how to stand up for Hindus without fostering Hindu communalism. Now, this is today also, I'm sure many of you will recognize it as a predicament that we are in. That is, how can you accept that there are Hindu cultural interests, or if there are Hindus who are in a minority somewhere and they have issues, how do you take that up without fostering Hindu communalism? Now we're talking about minority communalism here. Let me make it very clear. I just wanted to highlight one very interesting irony almost, that the Hindu Mahasabha and an organization known as the Bharat Sevashram Sangha were engaged in relief work in this area. And one of the workers, it's one of those coincidences, who brought money and sindoor in bags from Maharashtra for the women of Noakhali was none other than Vishnu Karkare. Does it ring a bell for anyone? Vishnu Karkare, friends, was later one of the co-conspirators of in the Gandhiji's murder. Now, he belonged to Ahmednagar, he arranged the gun, etc., etc. So, what is Gandhi really doing then? He's standing up for the right of the individual and community to practice their faith. And yet, and I want to underline this for today, he never pandered to the perception of victims that they were helpless, that they needed to stay in ghettos. He spoke out against victimhood. He spoke out against ghettoization. He insisted that people went back to their villages and that the Muslims should ensure that nothing would happen to them. And his mission of peace, I would say, helped the Hindus from falling prey to the efforts of the Hindu communal groups, the Mahasabha and others who had come into this area and wanted to use the communal situation in order to spread their political influence. Do remember one thing, at this moment in time, and that's why I think it's so important to see Gandhi from a historical perspective, not just in a very general way in terms of Gandhian thought. We are talking about the pre-partition situation. The Hindu Mahasabha has been completely routed in the 1946 elections. The only seat they could win in the whole country was that of Shama Prasad Mukherjee and in Bengal. So this is not the Hindu Mahasabha which is feeling very assertive and all on the eve of Gandhiji's murder. So Gandhi's ideas on Hindus, on India, on the issue of the homeland of Muslims, as I pointed out earlier, on the homeland of the Hindus, it was very, very clearly the opposite of the view put forward by the Hindutva ideologues and especially Savarkar. In fact, when there was an abortive attempt on Gandhi's life on the 20th of January, just 10 days before he was assassinated, Madan Lal Pava had tried to, from within this group, they had tried to throw a bomb on the prayer meeting. And what does Gandhiji say about this? Very fascinating. Gandhiji said, he probably looked upon me as an enemy of Hinduism. Right? And then he said later on, in the same verse, in the same paragraph, he said, to those who are at the back of the youth. So Gandhi knew it was not just one youth. He knew what was behind that, the politics. He said, to those who are at the back of the youth, I would appeal to desist from such activity. And what does he say again? Hinduism can be saved only by my method. Hinduism can be saved only by my method. So he knew the terrain. He knew the terrain on which the Hindu ideologues, the Hindutva ideologues were mounting their challenge to him. Sometime in the 1990s, when Hindu communalism became a significant political challenge, many people, I'm referring to Kumkum Sangari, I'm referring to Sehmat, the organization who had an exhibition, came out with pamphlets, with postcards. Many people studied Gandhi's last fast. So did I, because that fast was undertaken primarily to ensure that Muslims were equal citizens of India, right? This whole thing about 55 crores and all, which payment to Pakistan, which Godse brings in, that is propaganda. For Gandhi, it was very clear it was to ensure that Muslims were equal citizens of India. So from that time onwards, I started to write about or look into the whole issue of the assassination, not merely as the kind of the action of a fanatic, as it was presented as some kind of loony fringe, as the word is used, but how it was a question of two contesting visions of Indian nationhood, and where there's a secular vision and there's a communal vision, and how Gandhi's assassination becomes the clash, or rather becomes Shahadat versus Asurvad. That from that time onwards, the Hindutva writings, they started to portray it as Asurvad. It is the killing of a demon. And now, of course, I don't have to go into it, but today, if you look at social media, or if you look at even publications of every kind, you will see the extent to which Gandhi is sought to be appropriated. On the one hand, his Swachh Abhiyan in the sub, or and as you know, the Mahatma, and how in every possible way his politics, his secularism is undermined and dismissed by the Hindu communal groups. Now, Gandhi, if you recall, had said to the widows of Noakhali, I have not come to bring you consolation, I have come to bring you courage. And if you recall, what did he do? He asked them to wear the symbols that they had been forced to forego during the Noakhali riots, the Shankha bangles, the Sindhur, which is the mark in their hair, the vermilion mark. Now, do you not think that this is something undoubtedly audacious, if not provocative, coming as it did in the wake of communal violence, which had as its distinctive feature the erasure of the religious cultural identity of the Hindus? I had worked, like many of you here, I'm sure, in the aftermath of the anti-Sikh riots in Delhi in 1984. I had worked in Sultanpuri, one of the resettlement colonies, where there had been a lot of killings. And we had been witness to the horrific scenes of Sikh men cutting their hair to escape recognition by the mobsters and consequent death. And I thought to myself, that I doubt if even the most doughty of secularists, and there were many among us who were out there. There was Veena Das, there was Uma Chakravarti, there was, and there were so many people and NGOs and groups who were there. Would they have suggested to Sikh men that they should have the courage to keep long hair and wear turbans, the symbols of their faith? Similarly, would Gandhi have stood for the ghettos which came up at Tilak Vihar? That is the colony where Sikh widows were resettled and became a ghetto. And when I was preparing this talk over the last month, I wrote this part here, which I'm just reading out, that I recall feeling very virtuously secular when I would go to Tilak Vihar as part of a women's group, Saheli, to play with the children and sing progressive songs with the women. तोड़ तोड़ के बंधनों को देखो बहनें आई हैं. And of course, Azadi, Azadi, much before it was docketed with Tukre Tukre in 2016. Not surprisingly, as we did not question the prevalent communal ideology, we were simply doing firefighting, I think, today. Much after our women's groups moved on to another crisis site, the worldview which survived among the Sikh widows of the 84 riots was the worldview of the Gurdwara Sevaks, who continued to be the regular visitors to the widows much after we had left. And this worldview was of the saga of Sikh martyrdom, to which their husbands were the latest entrants who were to be glorified. Friends, Gandhi very clearly in Noakhali did not fall for this. He urged Hindus to return to their villages and Muslims to stand surety for the erstwhile Hindu inhabitants of their village. A certain kind of secularist, and I include myself in that, would be almost horrified at what I'm calling Gandhi's choice of a religious way out of a communal conflict. Ordinarily, we know the harbingers of communal harmony or the healers of communal rift go about their task by stressing common points of reference between communities or universal elements in all religions. Therefore, syncretic religious traditions, bhakti, Sufi, they get invoked in the belief that sharp definitions between religions or sharp boundaries between religions are what lead to communal trouble. I remember myself when I was part of a citizens committee in Okhla in Delhi right after the demolition of the Babri Masjid and the whole communal polarization in the country after that. We organized an Eid Milan and later a Holy Milan, working between the Hindu and the Muslim areas in the Okhla area to bring them together. But Gandhiji's way was different. For Gandhi, his secularism being nourished by his faith, religion and secularism are not exclusive in his practice. In fact, locating religion as constitutive of secularism yielded many an insight. And so the way I have tried to present the talk here today is to see that by understanding how Gandhi went about helping the survivors of communal conflict reconstitute their worlds at that point of time, can this benefit those of us who are engaged in the battle against communalism in India then and today? A little last bit. I know I have exceeded the time. I'm in recent times, in the 2019 elections, you might recall, and then, when the results came out, whether it was many of us, and I'm here only mentioning a couple of names, Rajiv Bhargav, Achin Vinayak, who's one of our very big crusaders against communalism, apart from being a very fine political scientist and theorist. Others have also spoken, like I am speaking, for a revival of what they have called Gandhi's model of communal harmony. That's the word that Rajiv uses. Achin talks about the good politics of religious appeal versus the bad politics of religious appeal. And Achin tries to bring the struggle against communalism, yoke it with the struggle for socialism, which many of us here also, I think, given the profile of this group, may have some sympathy with. All I'm saying, at the risk of being a bit repetitive in the end, is that the building of the Ram temple at Ayodhya and the Bhumi Pujan and all that happened around it, every time there is such a crisis, such an episode, I'm calling it crisis from one point of view, not for many, it would be a matter of celebration. Whether it is Manishankar Iyer, whether it is Yogendra Yadav, whether it is Pratap Bhanu Mehta, we can turn to very, very strong, inspired pieces in our newspapers, calling upon people to infuse secularism with a certain type of understanding of religion. To talk about, Yogendra Yadav did that very strongly. Pratap Bhanu Mehta did that, I remember very clearly, at the time of on the morrow of the results in June 2019. And I hope will not be the case that after, whether those of us who research into it, or those of us who listen to talks like this, those of us who are in this position, see ourselves as fighters against communalism in whatever possible ways. I just hope that we will do something more with it, and that it's not just going to be that you or I or any of the people I've talked about are going to write one more very eloquent op-ed on the morrow of the forthcoming electoral results later in the election campaign this year. Thank you so much, and thank you again, especially for your patience. I have exceeded the time limit by at least, even by Subhash's very liberal thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sucheta ji, for an excellent talk on Gandhi and the way he tried to deal with the Noakhali challenge, because most of us do not know much about that experiment. So you threw a new light on the whole Noakhali work, and so there have been many questions and comments on the participants here.
I hope so.
But before we take up the questions in the chat box, or we ask the participants themselves to unmute themselves and raise their hands. So I will ask Ravi to say a few words, and then we can start the discussion. Ravi, please.
Thank you, Subhash, and thank you, Sucheta ji, for accepting our invitation and such beautiful, wonderful talk. It's quite an experience, and it's beyond being scholarly and thoughtful. It's almost moving and one would like to sit quiet and brood over it. It's amazing. But we have to return to the dry land of politics, strategies, and discussions. So um, um, as Subhash picks up other questions from the audience, to start out the discussion. And I would, as I said, it's the question might sound jarring after such a moving talk, such a wonderful talk. But, the Gandhi came through as the great man that he was in your talk, a man of conviction, of such grand stature that it is impossible to, I would say, draw operational lessons from him. How do we mortals hope to become models like him and hope to inspire other people through our conduct? So the question I have in my mind is of more relates to where you ended or where you began, not in the middle part of where you dealt with Gandhi. His model, the way I see it, demanded society to change.
Yes.
And even in the question of secularism. And the model, what is known as we lay people understand as the Western model, is the model of state keeping itself separate from religion. Now, when we think of which one in the operational sense, it is difficult to change the society and relatively easier to change the political structure. So the Western model of secularism, it seems to me, is more easily operational because, you can write a constitution, you can write laws, you can force the governments to keep away from religion to the extent it is possible. It is impossible to keep governments, from religion. No Western model is fully secular either in the entire political practice. But comparatively, when you are dealing with the state structure, it is easier to legislate, it is easier to set the boundaries. Compared to that, if you want the kind of civilizational value Gandhi was trying to instill in the society in order for secularism to work, that is order of magnitude much harder. So Gandhi's model is much harder to practice because it wants society to change compared to the Western model, which institutes a certain kind of a state and its boundaries. So do you think that this difficulty, this objective difficulty, that it is far harder to change the society than to change the polity, or a state, polity is more general, that is at the root of the failure of the secular project that we are witnessing today in India? So the model that you came through as sympathetic with that model is to give respect to the religious view, religious strategy, or religious doorway to secularism. It seems to me that the requirement that the society must change in order to live those values, that may be at the root of the predicament that we are in. And maybe I'm just being provocative so for you to bring out the answer, that maybe, the Western, more linear kind of, more mechanical kind of secularism, to state it much more firmly in the constitution so that the political parties cannot have, it is difficult for them to overstep that. That would have worked better than expecting the society to change in a deeper sense that Gandhi was trying to do through his model. So, I know.
Can I, before other questions come, if I may just...
Please.
I'm not going to try and answer it, but just share some reactions to what Ravi said.
Yeah.
I think very pertinent point that you're making about the difficulty of a political practice, which is the foundation of which, or the aim of which, is change of heart of the people or transformation in society. You're absolutely right. It's very difficult. However, two things here. Number one, it's a very ideal path. You see, I'm trying not to use the word model. Okay. So it's an ideal way or a path to learn from. We have to adapt it. It's not as if we can just copy, of course. We have to adapt it. It is a very ideal path today, I would underline, when the state and its institutions have been completely desecularized or communalized, if I can use that word. So today in 2020, however much I may hope that the present regime may not come back to power, I believe that today the hope is at the ground level. The hope is to reach out in a molecular way through small groups. We can call it civil society groups. Something we are trying to do right now, even with the election campaign in Delhi, right? How to support the India Alliance, something as small as that. The idea is to reach out and be where the people are. So it's not a, I agree, it is not a state-centric approach to building secularism. However, Ravi, I don't know if you would agree, and maybe you will. It's Gandhi was not pushing for or did not stand for a non-Western path of secularism. Whatever I may say, I only quoted one sentence, but there are so many more. He was secular in the Nehruvian sense of secular, if I can call it that, right? Gandhi was a Nehruvian secularist in the way we understand that term. I'm only using it as a shorthand to, indicate that. Was very clear that the state had to be secular. Even his statements that the Congress should be dissolved and we need a Lok Sevak Sansthan and all that. It is not the time to talk about it today, but I have written elsewhere. It has been misunderstood. Gandhi wanted the Congress to continue. Gandhi stood for mainstream politics. He knew that his disciples, Nehru, supported by Patel and Rajendra Prasad and others, were capable of doing what needed to be done at the level of the state. That is, whether it was the negotiations with the retreating imperial power, or it was the formulation of the constitution, or the entire business. After all, it's not just about secular principles. It was an entire transition period and transformation. So this is one path he is following, and I am picking up on it because, as you could see, it is in the spirit of what communists used to call, okay, I won't use the word, but anyway, I'm simply calling it self-criticism, that I have tried to see the practice, my own practice, in a few areas, whether it was 84 riots or 93 post that, as a person who tried to be part of civil society groups and do something, we had a certain idea. And I think that something in what Gandhi did in Noakhali is of relevance, and is of particular relevance because formal politics right now, mainstream politics, has been cornered by, and the institutions of the state have been cornered and whatever by the Hindu communal, by the right-wing forces. So maybe, we could do the ground molecular type of work, which was done by Gandhi and company in the national movement on the anti-imperialist front, from non-cooperation, or rather from Champaran onwards, if we see in India. So maybe we need a second freedom struggle today, where we have to, maybe we cannot throw these people out of power at the top level, but maybe like Gandhi, and we find a way of going among the masses and connecting and this thing. So that is what I would say.
There is a question in the chat box. Alok Tandon wants to know, despite his secular views, why did Gandhi fail to contain Muslim Hindu communalism? Please.
Okay. It is a very difficult question. Number one answer to that is, and I'm not trying to evade the question, partition is something which was, let us accept this, Alok, and others, that it was imposed by the British. There was only that much we could do as Indians to prevent it. It was an award. It was not an agreed settlement. It was thrust on us. The different segments of nationalist leadership, nationalist movement, politics, tried to fight it in the end, but it was too late by 1947. So the responsibility for partition lies very clearly at the door of the imperial power, which not only divided and ruled, but divided and quit. And they divided and quit because it was in their strategic long-term interest in the Indian subcontinent. And I'm underlining the word strategic. Normally we talk about neo-imperialism. It was not about economy only. It was the strategic interest. They wanted to have fueling stations in Andaman and Nicobar. They wanted to have the soldiers in their army coming from the Gurkhas and the Punjabi Musalmans from what would be Pakistan. They wanted an India divided. It is very much there in the documents. Many of us have written the books on it. It's very clear that that was their game plan. And they had the power to impose it, regardless of the kind of things which Freedom at Midnight and all the total whitewashing which has been done, which is all rubbish. However, the second player was the Muslim League. They asked for a homeland for Muslims. It suited the British to support them. The Congress was, in that sense, the third player where it comes to partition. They wanted a united India. They fought for a united India, not only Gandhi. And it was that they did not have enough time, I would say. There were many weaknesses in their struggle against imperialism. Sorry, there were many weaknesses in their struggle against communalism. And Hence, a situation came. For example, let me tell you that the police, the army, everything was with the British, even when there were Indians in power in the provinces. That whole control was there. When the riots were happening, people were begging them, send the army, send the police, and the reaction of the British was, let them stew in their own juice. So Congress did not have state power. Congress at that time had a very hopeful idea. They thought, okay, in the end, if we are not able to stop partition, then let us accept it temporarily. And they hoped that once the British would go away, then, like happens where there is a fight between two brothers, Hindus and Muslims, India and Pakistan can come back together. That did not happen. The manner in which partition took place, the huge displacement of the population, the way that people moved across the borders. Here again, you see, it is the game of imperialism which continues even till today. Indians and Pakistani historians, we are still, and Indian and Pakistani public is still blaming each other for the worst part of what happened in partition. And the imperialists have got away scot-free then and today in the writing on the subject, they are able to successfully do this. Even today, they will be writing to say that, oh, Mountbatten in Pakistan, they will say Mountbatten was a friend of of Nehru, so he came under Nehru's influence. But nowhere will you see the most important fact for why you see partition can take place without displacement. It could have taken place. The British commander-in-chief, he was a very great man in India, Claude Auchinleck. You can read his writing. He said one thing. He told the viceroy, he said, we need 5 years to divide the army. 5 years. Other governors of the provinces said 5 to 10 years we need to get out of India and to leave behind everything okay. But these were the few people who cared about India. They had spent their whole lives there. The British ruling class, the anti-Congress thing, okay, you know, they have opposed us. That sentiment was strong and their own interests. They wanted a divided subcontinent. It should be so weak. India should be fighting against Pakistan. They feared that India under Nehru will be part of the Soviet camp. I have read so many classified documents about this. They thought if India goes to the Soviet camp, Pakistan will come to the US camp. And then we can play. What was Cold War? That whole scenario was played out in the files, in the documents, in the plans, in the period 1946 to 47. So it is very important that we recognize that the whole thing was done by the British. We made some mistakes. We should accept those mistakes. And Gandhi, I don't know if you know this, how many days he went to meet Jinnah in 1944 after he came out of jail in what was called Gandhi Jinnah talks. Congress conceded the substance of Pakistan. That means in 1942 itself, they said, if any regions want to go out of India, they want self-determination. Gandhi's words. If they want self-determination, we will allow them to go. His whole idea was somehow let the British go. They are the mischief makers. Once they go, we will be able to work out something between ourselves. But that was not happening.
Srishti Khanna has raised her hand.
Okay.
Srishti, can you unmute yourself and raise your question? Srishti.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yeah, please. Yeah, you're audible. Please. Go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for such an illuminating and interesting talk. As you have said in the talk and explained it very well, that how the Gandhi secularism was quite very different. In this context, I would like to understand his anti-conversion stand. As you've said that during partition, he was encouraging all the people in Noakhali, that Hindus, that you should not convert, you should stand to your own religion. But even in usual times, during partition, it was forcible conversion that he was against, that Gandhi was against. Even before that, we see like when his son Harilal converted into Muslim, it deeply saddened him. And similarly, in case of lower caste, we see the Shuddhification, which was professed by Shraddhanand. He was against the Shuddhification. He argued that these lower castes were Hindus and they should not be converted into. So he was generally against this notion of conversion. So how are we to understand this stand of Gandhi, and how are we to now reconcile his secularism in this context? That I would like to understand.
Thank you, Srishti. I don't think there is any contradiction between his stand on conversion and his secular beliefs and his secular practice. I think Gandhiji has been severely misunderstood. The last part that you said on the issue of caste also, where again my only answer will be, I don't have before me the references here, my only answer will be, take a look at his practice. That's what I started by saying, and that's what I ended today by saying. He said, my life is my message. What happens is that particularly many Ambedkarite critics of Gandhi, if I can call it that, are very sharply critical of what they call his acceptance of the caste system, which we know from Gandhi's revolutionary practice, where it came to in the broad field of untouchability, right? I don't give so much importance to, that Harijan is a euphemistic word. You see, words and terms, I have no problem. I personally use the word Dalit. But my point is, there is criticism of Gandhi used the word Harijan, God's people. Why doesn't he call a spade a spade? Why does he accept caste system in this respect? We have to see also what is at that time, what terms meant sense to whom. What was the word then? Let me give you an example. Ram Raj. I have spent my whole life answering this question that people, young, bright students like you are saying, why, Gandhi was responsible for communalizing the situation. Why did he support the Khilafat movement? He brought religion into politics. Or it is said that Ram Raj, for example, very often we hear this, that he brought a religious vocabulary, right? Now, the thing is, when he was going to a village in Bihar, and if he says, this is the utopia of my dreams, I want you to, this is what, when independence will be, are we expecting the peasant in that village to understand the word utopia or even its Hindi counterpart? Ram Raj evoked at that time, it did not evoke the word Hindu Raj. Today, today the word Ram can, because of its link with Hindu majoritarianism and state build triumphalism and everything, it has a certain threatening tone about it, right? If you tell a Muslim, if a Hindu tells a Muslim, we are going to bring Ram Raj in 2024, it's different. But when Gandhiji is talking about Ram Raj, it is talking in the language of the people. It's like, as I said, this is what people saw Ram Raj as that. And I've spoken to so many Muslims when doing interviews for the freedom of people who are in this freedom struggle, and asked them, Gandhi's talk about Ram Raj, what did you know? Did you feel alienated or could you connect? They said, of course, we knew what he was talking about. Gandhi used to, why Gandhi? The activists of the freedom struggle used to sing the chopais of Tulsidas to mobilize the peasantry. And I'm talking about Communist Party workers. I'm talking about radical peasant activists in United Provinces in the 20s and 30s. They would sing to mobilize. When they went to the villages, they were singing from the chopais of Tulsidas. They had a certain resonance. And Muslim villagers have told us that they identified with that because they grew up in a setup where even in their families, people knew this. Today, that is not the case. But that is why, as I said, a historical perspective. And I gather you are a student of history. I hope that you will be able to see it in that perspective. As far as specifically conversion is concerned, I totally agree with you that he was not for it. But I don't think that there is anything wrong in his position on that matter. It has been, I think, misrepresented or misunderstood at least.
Abhinandan has raised his hand. Abhinandan, can you unmute yourself and speak your question in brief?
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Mahajan, for this brilliant presentation and talk. My question is that, so there have been debates with respect to the two terms that we can concurrently use. One is secularism and the other is pluralism. Now, secularism as an idea has a solidified definition, which is the Western definition, like separation of church and state and separation of religion and state. However, pluralism, particularly value pluralism that Berlin writes about, he says that in pluralism, there is an acceptance of identity. There is a tolerance which is there. Yes. So what I have been I've been working on a paper with respect to these two ideas, and I have been trying to theorize that there should be two different moralities. One should be a state's morality and one should be a social morality. Okay. And in India, social morality should be pluralism and state's morality should be secularism.
I think that's a very fine distinction you're making. I would totally go along with it, but please go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, thank you. So, so this, and also what I saw from your presentation, that Gandhi's secularism, as we call it, is particularly pluralism, yes, where he goes on to say that you have to accept your identity, whatever identity that is there. And when William Galston theorizes political pluralism based on Berlin's idea, he also gives on these examples like of practicing pluralism in that sense. So I wanted to know your point of view on the debate between these two terms. And also, since I believe that secular as a term, which has been demonized in today's politics, the demonization fundamentally comes from the confusion that has occurred between the Western definition and the Indian contextualization. Yeah. So
Abhinandan, you couldn't have put it better. I'm also a bit surprised that I did not use the word pluralism. Mostly when I talk about the freedom movement, whether it is Gandhi or Nehru or any other tradition within it. Pluralism is the word that I always use. Composite culture, we used to use that word a lot earlier. And pluralism is absolutely the preferred word. The reason that today I took this up is because I was trying to place, as you could see, the debate on the issue of what type of secularism do we need in India. From 1994, I'm not saying there wasn't earlier, there were writings on this earlier. I'm not going into what the leaders said, but I'm talking about among political scientists, historians, whatever. So basically from the 90s onwards, that's why the anti-secularism, then the theorizing secularism, secularize and its critics, because the word used here has been secularism. And as I said, I conceived this talk today as a not as a counter, but as a continuation to Rajiv Bhargav's talk last time. So therefore, I framed it in the parameters that he was using. I should have on my own. I would certainly prefer the word if I had to talk about Gandhi or the freedom movement. I would certainly prefer to use the word pluralism. Only thing I might say is, because there has been an attack, since you mentioned it, Abhinandan, you said that the kind of, what word did you use? Attack on secularism, or some other word you used? Denunciation, something? Did you use a word? It doesn't matter. I can't get him now. It's demonization. Thank you. Absolutely. It has been, because of the demonization of secularism, perhaps, I think my line on this has been that no, secularism, we will not throw out secularism, including the usage of the word secularism. It's partly a reaction, as you rightly say, to the, I would call it the denunciation, but you're using a better word, demonization of secularism. And believe me, it is very important to stand up for secularism, whether, as Ravi said, in the state form, the state initiated form, or in the people sort of form. It's otherwise, because from very many angles, and that is why I critiqued Ashish Nandi, whom I have great regard for his other writing, and I use it, and I personally have great regard for him. But this particular formulation of Gandhi being an anti-secularist did a lot of damage, I think. And therefore, I just took it up. And I think we need to uphold secularism precisely because of the attack on it. I would just say that. And it has come from varied sources, including subalterns, where one would not expect it. Subaltern studies has done it, Gyanendra Pandey. What I mean is secular people who are secular in themselves, have rubbished secularism, and they have also rubbished the use of the term communalism. And I think both words are very valuable. And I would say that secularism, for me, is, when I talk about a secular struggle or secular practice, I mean it. I sometimes say I'm not even talking about our constitution. I would like to define it in the sense of the Indian national movement sense of secularism, which is anti-communalism. I would go as far as that. But thank you so much. I'm so happy to know you're working on it.
Before I take up other questions in the chat box, I would like to invite Professor Aditya Mukherjee and Uzula Mukherjee. Both of them are here. If they can say a few words. Aditya ji.
think it's,
Rudra-ji.
oh no. Oh, this one thing. Totally awkward.
Can you unmute yourself? I think he's not able to get my question. So before then I invite Vinod Mumbai or another friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Let me just, it's very enlightening and nice talk. And I just wanted to pick up on a question that I had asked Rajiv Bhargav at the end of his talk. And so I think you very rightly drew the distinction between the Western idea of secularism, laïcité, or as they call it in French, and the Indian concept, whether we call it pluralism, I prefer to call it a shared cultural experience as a way of defining. And this goes back to my childhood. I was born in Lahore, and when we migrated, I was 6 years old, and I saw the worst part of the violence on all sides as we went through refugee camps in Punjab, Amritsar, Firozpur, Moga, etc., etc. But I noticed one thing, that even in that worst of times, there used to be dargahs at which Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh women, including my mother, would go in these areas to get some, I don't know at that young age what they were getting, but they were getting something. And they regarded it, even in those troubled times at the height of the communal violence, they regarded it as a shared culture in which they didn't see a difference, whether it was some peer or it was some swami or, whoever ran the dargah at which they would get some taweez or, some benefit that they were getting. So in the years since, this shared culture, I've lived abroad now for almost 50 years, and I go back to India every year, but I see this shared culture experience has disintegrated or has gone away gradually. My question is this a result of just politics? Is it a result of the educational system that we have in which, or other forms? And you spoke so movingly about the Sikh, anti-Sikh violence of 84 and so on. So what are the features in which that shared culture, which was our form of secularism, if the Gandhian time, etc., has gone away now?
Thank you so much, Vinodji. I do recall you asking a question in last time session, and I was very struck by how perceptive it was. My parents also came from Lahore in 1947, if I may be permitted to share that with you.
Yes,
And,
there are many millions like us.
Of course, of course. At some point, I will ask the organizers if they can share your email with me so that I can be in touch with you about your experiences of that time. So if it's all right with you, I will ask them for your email or phone number, something. Okay? Yeah.
Okay.
About your question, you see, I can say, I don't have an academic answer to this, which will be very, I think, satisfactory, because there are so many reasons why there has been a decline in what one can call, or rather, the desecularization of society. We moved in a very positive direction. And then we moved back also in a certain. So clearly in my mind, the fault is with the political establishment, with right-wing politics, whether it is Hindu right-wing or Muslim right-wing. Better to call it Hindu communal politics and Muslim communal politics. They have both are responsible for pushing for sharp distinctions between the communities. I know among Muslims how Muslims have been discouraged to go to the dargahs and encouraged to go to the masjid. And similarly, that has been the case. I know as a Punjabi Hindu growing up in Delhi, where for 2 decades at least in the 50s, no, I was born in the late 50s, in the 60s and 70s, we went, as Punjabi Hindus, we went instinctively to the Gurdwara in the neighborhood. After 1984, and I remember very clearly, this divide came between Hindus and Sikhs in Delhi. And we were in the families itself and in the polarization also, this started to happen. Big temples started to come up earlier. The idea was the Sikhs are this, they are this thing. So we have seen it as something which has been done in a very concerted way by the political cum religious leadership. It is not that, sometimes it can be because of secularization of society that, these common areas may have gone. Now the common areas are the nightclubs or the thing. No, I think there is a whole politics behind it. I recall in the 80s in New Friends Colony where I was living, a mandir called Mata Ka Mandir was built on a very grand scale, and the contribution, the chanda as we call it, the contributions were collected saying that the Sikhs have their Gurdwara, see, they are fortified, we also need to have fortified temples. And it was the president of the NDMC, New Delhi Municipal Committee, retired president, who was behind this, and other very, very well-known figures in, I would say, Punjabi Hindu society at that time. And government, and of course, when we have had communal governments, it has not been, they have also been behind polarization, but certainly it suits politics.
Subrat Sarangi has raised his hand, our old friend Subrat Sarangi. Subrat, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, yes,
Subrat,
yes.
please.
Can I?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, audible.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Mahajan. It was really a very nice talk, and as Ravi said, one could close the eyes and or I mean those photographs were so moving. Close the eyes and just imagine that time, how those times people must have lived, and Gandhi would have lived through those Noakhali days. Thank you so much. I have one comment and one question. One comment is uh, Gandhi was perhaps, I mean, of course, he was secular, there's no doubt about it, but his secularism was so abstract and so philosophical at a high level that perhaps common people couldn't, it was not accessible to common people. And as a result, using the same words, like let's say the words like Ram Rajya, Ram Dhul, and those type of words could be easily misappropriated by the by the Hindutva fellows,
Of course,
perhaps.
sure,
And
absolutely.
yeah, okay. So you agree with it? Agree with this?
Of course.
Mm.
I said so
And
myself. That today, the word Hanuman, Ram, these are menacing. These are threatening words today.
yes, exactly. Yes, Jai Shri
Absolutely.
Ram. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One more question is, I don't know. I'm not a student of history. I'm a student of physics. But just thinking about the days through which we have also lived, um, will it be right to say that Nehruvian secularism, which was of course correct as an official government policy, continued in some way willy-nilly with its imperfections till Indira Gandhi dabbled with Bhindranwale and that movement, and then the Rajiv Gandhi's time when Shah Bano case and all that, so that the ground was prepared for the Hindutva again to take over, and the ground was taken over as we see today. Will it be kind of, can we say that those times of Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi, those were like watershed moments in Nehruvian secularism, which drove the Indian polity towards preparing the ground for the Hindutva fellows to take over now?
Oh, I didn't
That's my
get your
question.
full name.
My name is Subrata Sarangi.
Acha. Shubhrata?
I'm calling from
Okay.
Sarangi. I'm from.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shubhrata, it's a very, very vast subject. It would take at least, I think, one lecture to go into it. Let me say just in shorthand, I'll just take 2, 3 sentences
Right.
for now,
Sure.
and we can talk about it individually whenever.
Right.
I have no doubt in my mind that the resurgence, as I see it, or revival of the Hindutva politics, Rath Yatra, Advani,
Yes.
Gujarat, etc., and worse later. I would rather link it more clearly to the period of 1947-48, right?
Mhm.
When,
Mhm.
because of the bitterness and revenge feelings that there were between communities, which were made use of by RSS and the way they grew, and Hindu Mahasabha and other organizations at that time, and so much so that they had the, I would say, the courage, no, not in a good sense, but they had the,
Mm.
okay, let's not use the word courage. They could do something
Yeah.
as big as and dastardly as murdering the Mahatma. It was, even to
Yes.
conceive of it in your political imagination has to come before the actual act. So that leap
Right.
of, extreme communalism that we had at that time, and then I'm giving you a slightly different uh, linear teleology from yours. Uh, then there is 20 years, I would say, of a breathing space. It is because of Nehruvian circularism, but it is also because of, I feel, the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, that is Gandhi's martyrdom. Gandhi's assassination gave a shock to people, and I have evidence of this. I've written about it also. People who were attracted to that Hindutva politics at that time, Hindu communal politics, they were shocked
Mm.
at how far that politics could go, right? They only wanted a certain, okay, just put people in there, just show that no, Hindus also matter, that's all. So 20 years, things were fine. And then the riots, Jamshedpur, Jabalpur, there is a whole, I don't want to, what I'm
Yes.
trying to say is we
Right.
should
Right.
not, I personally, as a social scientist, would not link it only to what is happening at the state level, or to the leadership of, that is Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, I would see it in broader terms, that societally, at a level of society, there is a these are breathing
Okay.
space.
Okay.
Then then it comes back, and there is ideology to it. And then this resurgence is coming again because of various reasons. Personally, I think Indira Gandhi's, it's not only that she was a martyr herself to a very dastardly killing, but
Yes.
I mean, I think what has to, I mean, I personally give her, what do I say? I appreciate the fact that she stood up for secularism, even in not changing the guards. She upheld that.
Yes.
And she was told that
Yes.
there was a, threat to her life. So
Threat to
it's
her
a
life.
mixed
Yes.
thing. And also saying that she went to temples and all that, I don't know. Given today what is happening, the state triumphalism, with the office of the prime minister being totally, embroiled in the
Building the temple.
establishment and inauguration and everything of the temple. What the when she went and broke a coconut, or somebody broke a coconut, somehow now it somehow seems like something not very big. But I agree with you that there was a difference between Nehru, certainly, in the way that he stood up for secularism in his person and as prime minister. The lines that he drew, I mean, the letter that he writes to Rajendra Prasad,
Rajendra Prasad.
asking him not to
yes.
go for the inauguration
Somnath.
of the Somnath temple. You know about it.
Right.
That letter should be in every textbook,
Mm-hmm.
It's a very powerful thing.
There is a question in the chat box by V.S. Sridhar. For this model to become operational, should one be a believer? Hindutva fellows are pseudo-religious. Secularists are largely non-believers. But this model requires true believers. Are they the silent majority that falls outside these two groups? But those who were pious, not so communal in their lives, are now prey to Hindutva brigade. Where does this idea take us? Sorry.
Who has this question?
V.S. Sridhar. V.S. Sridhar.
Okay. It is the question which I frankly grapple with myself all the time. Sridhar, the way you have even put it, it is as if I'm formulating this question to myself while writing this piece. Now, in the present form, in an earlier form, part of the reason I have not published it, the book, is because of some very acute, I will say, hesitation on my part, precisely on the lines that you are talking about. That is, I am putting a foot forward as a secular person into a area which is the domain, which is where there is a domain where I'm talking about belief, about faith. And this is the question I ask myself. Do I have to be a believer to go down Gandhi's path? And my answer will be no. I think Nehru went down Gandhi's path after Gandhi was gone in many ways. And he was not a believer. He was an agnostic. At best, if we go by discovery of India, then even when he speaks so eloquently about Ashoka and the Buddha as being symbolic, if there is a symbol which, can be said to represent India, he does not pick up a Hindu symbol. Even when he goes to the ancient period, it is Ashoka and the Buddha that he picks up. but yet he is an agnostic. So I think I would be in the same position as you. I am, as you can see, this is a work which is full of where I am trying to see how Gandhi's ideas at that time, sorry, not ideas, how his practice. I have reading, rereading. I will probably revisit also Noakhali. Still, there are some people there. The idea is, how can we, my generation, your generation, how can we, as I'm not a formal political activist, but I see myself as a political intellectual activist in that sense, like think, how can we do something in the domain of anti-communalism, whether by sitting with people, whatever, how do we, what can we get from Gandhi? And obviously, I cannot become a believer overnight. So it is, how do I creatively adapt it to my situation? And you can see, I think, in how I presented that I'm suggesting that somewhere Gandhi was able to do this. And can we take something out of it? And that is why I don't call it a model. Is there something, maybe what we take from it is that we have to go and stay in the house of a poor person in order to talk about poverty. Maybe at least that much if I can take away from it. So that's what I mean. Each one of us can take away whatever they want from his path.
There is a related question, but I would like to underline that. Question by Manas Firak. Very interesting question. I have a conceptual conundrum. If a certain kind of religiosity can be secular and bridge the gap between these two terms, then what is the communal really? Is it an in-between zone between the religious and the secular, which fails to be either? If it has elements of religion, can it also have elements of secular in a strictly non-religious sense? Manas Firak's question.
Manas, I see. Thank you very much for the question. And I can see the logic in a logical sense of your argument. But as you would expect, I find it very difficult to agree with it because, as I've said many a time today and even in the answers to the questions, that for me, communalism and secularism are poles opposite. I don't buy this line of yours that, I shouldn't say line, by this formulation of yours, as I said, which is very logical, very intriguing in the way that you make it. But for me, you are trying to say that because religion is constitutive of both, then where is the counterposition? But for me, there is a very sharp counterposition because communalism, in an instrumentalist way, uses religion. It is not constitutive of religion. Religiosity, there is a problem there, yes. Very often from religiosity in society or certain groups, historically, we have seen a movement towards a stage of communalization. Historically, we can see that there is a drumming up of religiosity. If we were to say, look at the whole Ram Mandir movement from the Rath Yatra till today, we could see the trajectory as one of religiosity being drummed up, then being sharpened and polarized to form communalism. I have no problem with that. But I continue to have a very serious problem, and I continue to maintain that secularism and communalism, these are poles apart. A lot of contemporaries of mine and colleagues and friends have moved from the word communalism to communitarian. But for whatever reasons, and I think the reasons are clear in my talk today, I believe there is a certain strong ideological foundation within secularism. At the heart of secularism is an opposition to, an antithesis to communalism. At the heart of secularism, however you define it, that's why for me, whether it's Western Indian, it's not important. Anti-communalism, that's what Gandhi stood for. And that's what the basis is. And I stay with that. But thank you for showing that there is a certain logical possibility in my argument, which I will think about and see if I can tease that contradiction out of it. But, as I said, I work in the very empirical domain of history, not theory. But to the extent that we have to theorize a bit, so I'll see your point. Thank you, Man.
Deepankar has raised his hand. Deepankar, can you unmute yourself and share your question or comment? Deepankar, please.
Yes.
Go ahead.
My question is a little different from the questions which we had so far. I get a sense that today in India, in the political arena, there is a large section of the people are going beyond so-called political opposition and, discounting this, propaganda is being taken up by very ordinary people like me, right? And I think it is only going to continue irrespective of whatever is the outcome
right.
of elections. Now, we have to accept that while we have these discussions, very erudite discussions, 50 members, but actual propaganda today is happening in the WhatsApp groups.
Yes.
In very, very small messages, and which is spreading like wildfire. So,
yes,
I think it's a very important way to counter the narrative is to go and counter it in those forums not in the same language, but definitely in the same form. For example, I will not say I'm a student of history, but definitely I like history. But I had no idea before this election that what Congress talked about, that there was some sort of partnership between Muslim League and Mahasabha for government before independence.
During the war, yeah.
Yeah, during the war, right? I had no clue whatsoever of what you mentioned today about one individual who was in Noakhali actually became involved in the murder of Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I think there are many, many nuggets like this, which will shock people. And I still believe a large majority of Indians are not communal. They are just confused and they are consuming whatever is coming to them because majority of the people are, first of all, they are very young. We are a very young nation, right? And they have not seen much of it. So if historians like you, and not just you, but if people like us, and especially historians like you, can create or give the civil society certain nuggets, which can straight away confront lot of these lies. Again, I'll give an example. A lot of people didn't know 5 years back that Mr. Savarkar has written 6 letters, seeking
Yes,
pardon,
apologies.
and then he took
Apology
some
letters,
action, and then he took a house, and then he did nothing against the British, right? Now, if we would have known it 10 years back, we could have countered this in the social media for last 10 years. Now, today it is being done in last 2 years, right? So whatever damage has been done in 10 years, we take another 5 years or 10 years to get back. But my request to you and people like you will be, please supply us or give us such counter solid fact-based nuggets, which can be converted into small, audiovisual content or write-ups, which people can take it to these groups and counter the propaganda that is going. And I'm sure over a period of time, we can turn the large tide which has affected the nation. So I just thought I'd share.
I hope so. And I will certainly get your address from Subhash and Ravi and drop a line to you, and then we can be in touch. And there is one of our students who had set up, and they are engaged in this also. They are doing this. So we can collaborate on this. I'll happily do that.
Sure. I will
Thank
also.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dhatri has raised her question in the chat box. So I will ask her to unmute and share her question. Dhatri, please.
Hi. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll just read out the question. Thanks for the interesting presentation, ma'am. The question I have is about the acceptance of religious discourse in Indian politics. And as you rightly pointed out, religious symbolism was a powerful tool for mass outreach and political organization for the likes of Gandhi and many others.
Yes.
But however, does this salience of religion indicate at strict and consolidated religious identities, perhaps predating colonialism? And if this was not the case, and formation of watertight religious identities was indeed a colonial creation, what then explains the readiness of Indian masses to respond to religious discourse in politics? I mean, if this acceptance itself, if created by the British or otherwise, appears to be a slippery slope because a Gandhi could harness this mass response constructively, whereas the Sangh could destroy the social fabric using it.
So I understand what you're saying. What is the exact question? If the question part of it, if you'll repeat. I mean, I understood the formulation. Yeah.
Yes, the question is, what explains the readiness of Indian masses to accept religious discourse in politics?
I see. As I said, it's again, thank you for the question, but it's one of those $1 million questions. If we knew, if any of us had an answer to it, I think our intervention in politics and our ability to fight communalism would be very much stronger. Frankly, I don't think it is a pre-colonial thing, okay? That we are like this only. Indians are like that only. No, I think there is enough evidence given by the ancient and medieval historians to show that, those who are, I'm not talking about the right-wing ones, but the objective people have shown how identity was not primarily along religious lines. It was more of a local kind of identity, right? The Julahas of Banaras would see themselves as Julahas, not as Hindus. So very clearly, it is in the 18th and then in the 19th centuries that religious identity, in the sense of formal religion, that is Hindu, Muslim, all this comes with classification of census data. Even in the early census, as you are aware, the people who were reporting, when you ask them what religion, they would give the name of some local denomination. So it's only, so the whole, as you said, the consolidation of religious identities along these lines of organized religion, Hindu, Muslim, this is very much a colonial thing, which is part of the creation of a state and its requirements, etc., etc. Now, having said that, now this is, of course, a very different thing from why are Indian masses, inclined to, or why are they open to influence so easily by religious leaders or people who are bringing religion into politics? Now, that question is one has to, I don't think there is any answer at a general level. As I said, it's not in our DNA. I mean, I'm against answers which are, which are like that. Like, as I said, we are like that only. Indians are religious. No, that's not so. It's like, you do a survey and you find out this is untrue. We believe that we are vegetarian. Indians are vegetarian on the whole, and a survey is done and find that the majority of people in a certain area or even more are actually eating meat. So I think this is very specific to a certain time and space, which is India of the 21st century and the late 20th century. Certainly, our parents' generation, despite partition, what we might call the Nehruvian years or whatever, the building of the republic, certainly in those years, there was no, the religious identity was not strong. It was a struggle, believe me, to try and even get any information about even the experience of our parents. They refused to talk about what had happened to them during partition. It was, we have to build a new India. We have to build a new India which will be free from these primitive, atavistic, whatever. I mean, the whole, for want of a better word, the Nehruvian dream. So I think it is something very specific in the politics of the last 30 years, which has pushed our society in a certain way. And yes, we have failed. If we see ourselves as intellectuals who could have made a difference, we have not been able to stem the tide in the way we could have, because we were aware of a lot of things and, etc. But I don't think it's something like instinctual or instinctive about Indian people. I think right now they have been totally hoodwinked and etc., carried away by a certain type of politics and propaganda. And very soon, I'm sure it will, very soon, meaning there will be, we will see a return to a very different phase also. Because the same people whom we say they are so religious and they support this Ram temple and all that, they will the same people who are totally consumerist, who are everything which is non-religious or non-spiritual. So it is the success of Hindutva politics, I think, and the failure of our pluralist politics. And we will catch up at some point.
I think we should move towards conclusion of this interesting discussion we are having. And we will continue the discussion in further debates also. And thank you very much for accepting our invite and sharing your ideas. I'm sure there are many questions have opened before all of us, and what Manas Tirak used a interesting word. Many conceptual conundrums also have opened up before us. So we'll have to debate all those questions again. So I again thank the participants also for joining the debate. And okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. May I thank you and both the organizers, of course, yeah, but I really want to thank the participants in today's conversation. And is there some way of sharing the either the emails or the,
sure.
if there is a list of the people who participated, or I would be really very
Surely.
because
Yes,
certainly
and
some very important issues were raised, which I would like to,
yes, Sucheta ji, we will do that, as well as the recorded talk and discussion will be uploaded, and we will also pick on both your ideas. We are going to have you again 2 months or 3 months down the line, as suits, as per your convenience, your second lecture. And also the idea that we should have, Delhi-based, all our speakers, who are
Yes,
around.
yes,
We can have some face-to-face interaction.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.